This week on the Q Division podcast,
we open the case of 1962's Dr. No.
What's up with all the race makeup?
Why does everyone have chemistry?
And who ends up pulling a Chase Meridian this week?
All that and more on the Q Division.
Hello, agents! Welcome to another episode of the Q Division. I'm Gavin, and I've seen all the James Bond movies.
And I'm Chels, and I've seen 2 James Bond movies.
One official and one TV special sort of thing nonsense.
One alleged piece of media.
Yes, exactly.
The Q Division's top secret mission is to take a deeper look at the history and impact of the James Bond films and other media through a queer lens. Speaking of, the Q Division is a proud member of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective. You can find out more about Glitterjaw and their roster of shows that run the gamut of queer media at glitterjaw.com.
Amazing. Chels, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I feel like I actually watched a real movie, that had a point of view and style and people who knew how to say words. Man, we have just exceeded. I was like, these people are so hot. That's what I'm here for. Oh.
Yeah, it's a real shame. Obviously, Casino Royale, which we watched for last episode, didn't have color, no color version that exists. I don't think it would have saved it, but the color of Dr. No, so lush, so beautiful.
It makes me so mad at movies today. It's one of those, you just look at, I keep joking that the worst movie you watched 50 years ago looks better than the best shot movie today. And again, not beating these allegations.
I hard agree. Yeah, it's quite impressive. As I just mentioned, we are here to open the dossier on Dr. No, which is the very first in the Eon series of James Bond films. Before we do that, we're going to give a real brief history. I've written way too much, so feel free to cut me off at any point, Chels. I'm so sorry I'm making you sit through all this. Dr. No is based on Ian Fleming's 1958 novel of the same name. It's technically the 6th in the book series. It is not the first. It was written originally as a television outline, and that deal fell through. We talked in the last episode about Ian Fleming's attempts to sell it to TV, the money troubles, all that fun.
Good riddance.
Yeah. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of new characters in the background saga of this. The first being Cubby Broccoli, who is a movie producer who deeply loves the James Bond novels. And he sets up a meeting with Fleming, but he's unable to attend because the very same day his wife is diagnosed with serious cancer. He sends his business partner, who fucks the entire negotiations up and is basically like, why don't we do a TV thing? Ian Fleming does not want to hear it and is like, no, you can't have the rights to this. Cubby Broccoli's wife, Nidra, dies, and Cubby is left widowed with 2 kids. And basically, Cubby's like, well, what am I going to do? This is my golden ticket, and it didn't work out. Fleming himself has become exhausted with Bond. He kind of feels like he's a one-trick pony. He's run out of ideas. And he feels like the need to keep making these books, even though he doesn't really think he has anything left to say. He's also become a bit of an alcoholic. He's chain smoking and just generally making a race to the bottom in terms of being a human being. Enter French-Canadian film producer Harry Saltzman, who everybody says was a showman. He was basically like a P.T. Barnum type. He wanted everything to be a circus, and he never wanted anybody to miss him. Much like Cubby Broccoli, he's a Bond obsessive, and he goes to meet with Fleming, and Fleming is like, no, I've seen the things that you've made. I'm not interested. But Saltzman is a charmer, and he gets the rights to all of the Bond novels except Casino Royale and Thunderball for about $50,000. And then nobody wants to make these movies. He cannot convince a single person to put up the rest of the money to fund one of these movies. Cubby Broccoli is introduced to Saltzman through screenwriter Wolf Mankiewicz, who's a mutual friend. And he knows James Bond on the big screen is their mutual dream. And these two, I don't know, they get it off like a house on fire. They're suddenly best friends. They want to do this together. But Saltzman's option on the novels is quickly running out. Cubby's Hollywood connections, however, come to the rescue, and the two men found two different companies. Don Jock, which holds the rights of the books for films, and the company Eon, which is a company that will produce those films. Eon famously stands for Everything or Nothing. I love that. There's there's a video game much later in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, called Everything or Nothing, and that's like the perfect James Bond name. How that hasn't been used for an actual movie, I don't know.
A Hollywood blockbuster, 007, Everything or Nothing. Rated T for Teen.
EA Games. Challenge everything.
I mean, they're working on new movies. We'll see.
Both men head to NYC, and Columbia instantly turns them down. It's a very dumb move. United Artists agrees for about somewhere over $1 million that they're going to put up for it, which is a huge risk for the early 60s, but they're very staunch on the fact that, like, the $1 million is it. You're not getting more. So they go into making this movie, and luckily Cubby and Saltzman are able to convince the British arm of United Artists to pony up an extra $100,000 for the film's climax. But basically, like, you've now seen the movie. Like, you can, some of the background, there's a lot of spray painted cardboard at work here.
Yeah, you could tell that they were, like, getting their pocket lint together on this one.
Absolutely. Because of this small budget, there's several corners cut, and stock footage is used, aforementioned cardboard. Ken Adams, who does the entire production design, he says the entire budget for the production design was £14,500, with an extra £6,000 being paid by him and by the producers themselves. These gentlemen decide to cast. The studios want anyone from James Mason too old to Cary Grant, who would only sign for one movie, and also too old. Broccoli and Saltzman then meet a young Scottish gentleman by the name of Sean Connery, and he comes in and they instantly fall in love with this man. They're like, he is James Bond, which is hilarious because when he meets them, he like comes in like overalls. They say he basically looks like an offshore oil driller, not the gentlemanly James Bond from the novels. But they thought he had the quality that women want him, men want to be him, and that he was an anti-hero that you could root for, which perfect for James Bond.
When Ian was first told about the casting of Sean, he didn't agree at all. He was quite acid about it, as a matter of fact.
United Artists also had a feeling that it should have been an American star name. Sean Connery, they were against it.
Normally, the question from the distributor is who was going to play in it, Cary Grant or James Mason? And when you surprise them by telling you want an unknown, they were not entirely sold.
Left school when I was 13. Worked as a labourer and steel bender and fixer and delivered coal.
Bond was not an overgrown bodybuilding muscle man or words to that effect.
He and Harry knew Sean was the guy. When they were told by the studio, keep looking, they went to bat for Sean Connery.
They did fight for him. By casting this diamond in the rough type of person, really they want an American-style hero.
They just had a crush and they went with it, and sometimes That's what you do.
I mean, how could you not? Like,
he had charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent.
He truly did. By the way, forgot to mention this up top. I have a wonderful martini glass that you sent me after we recorded our first 2 episodes. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Mine is currently in the kitchen. I forgot to grab it.
Totally fine. It's beautifully emblazoned with the 007 logo. This is perfect for podcasting, by the way.
We had to have.
Just 2 weeks before filming, Ursula Andress is chosen to play Honey Rider after the producer saw a picture of her taken by her husband at the time, John Derrick. To appear more convincing as a Jamaican, Ursula Andress tanned and then was tan painted, and then ultimately ended up having her lines redubbed by actress Nikki van der Zeel due to Andress's heavy Swiss German accent. Race makeup. We don't have to. We don't have to do this.
And, like, here's the thing. You look at her in the movie and you're like, well, she must have been whiter than your host, Chelsea, because she doesn't look particularly bronze, we'll say.
Absolutely not.
If you're gonna be racist, come on. Like, what in the world are you doing? Also, the lip syncing for your life that was going on.
Yeah, let's just say that she was much more in the sashay away category than the Shantae you stay category.
Yeah, I know it's probably dubbed over, but still,
yeah,
it was rough.
And yeah, I agree. Like, I just don't why does that character need to be covered in race makeup? Why can't she just...
Also, like, we're not even through to the movie part yet, but also, why did that character have to be there?
Yeah.
There were other women in the movie.
Touche. I agree. Harry Saltzman picked Joseph Wiseman to play Dr. No because of his performance in the 1951 film Detective Story, and the actor had special makeup applied to evoke No's Chinese heritage, once again, with the race makeup. And they even go out of their way to be like, well, he's only half Chinese. But then, I don't know.
It's still full Mickey Rooney.
Yes. Hire a biracial person.
Come on.
I don't get it. We are
like Detective Story is a perfectly good movie. I really like it, but like his performance is not enough for like all this hullabaloo and nonsense.
And also, we're in 1962. It's not like, as the movie proves itself, it's not like there aren't Asian actors.
Yeah, they're there in the background.
Yeah. That's all they're doing too. It's wild. I mean, they're the most egregious one in this movie we haven't even talked to yet, but we'll get to it when the plot gets there. Terrence Young was selected as director. He had a Bond quality himself. He was a former tank commander who had also had a very stylish life. He was a lover of finer things, and he even brought Connery to his own tailor. He taught him how to walk. He taught, basically what we know as the suave film James Bond is Terrence Young impressing.
This is My Fair Lady.
Yes, exactly. He did. There was that weird bit where he kept putting marbles in Connery's mouth, but whatever, they went with it. Young brought a lot of humor to his films and even once stated, quote, a lot of things in this film, the sex and the violence and so on, if played straight, A, would be objectionable, and B, we're never going to go past the censors. But the moment you take the Mickey out of it, put the tongue out of the cheek, it seems to disarm. Previously mentioned Ken Adams, who did the production design, was also a key ingredient. He wanted Bond to have this extravagant, almost fantastical approach to the look. The same was carried over to Maurice Binder's title design, Monty Norman's score, which was eventually redefined by John Barry, and you'll get to that later. And in fact, the original Monty Norman score was arranged by John Barry and his orchestra, and it's based off a previous Norman composition called Bad Sign, Good Sign from a musical called A House for Mr. Bishwa. It's kind of like pseudo white guy trying to do Indian music nonsense in the original version.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so this version, the much more iconic James Bond theme, is much better than the House for Mr. Bishwa version.
I was born with this unlucky sneeze, and what is worse, I came into the world the wrong way round. Pundits all agree that I'm the reason why my father fell into the village pond and drowned.
Courts have ruled that the theme was written by Norman, despite claims and testimony by Barry that he had actually written the theme. Norman consequently has won 2 libel actions against publishers for claiming that Barry wrote the theme, most recently against the Sunday Times in 2001. So even in this current millennia, Norman's estate won that, at least. Ted Moore cinematography also really contributes to everything. Essentially what you're getting here is an A team that's sort of being built, and you'll see a lot of these names pop up in the later movies. Editor Peter Hunt decided to use like an innovative editing technique. I know we're both editors, so I hope you find this a little fascinating, but it uses extensive quick cuts and employs fast motion exaggerated sound effects on the action scenes. Hunt said his intention was to, quote, move fast and push it along the whole time while giving it a certain style, and added that the fast pacing would help the audience not notice any writing problems.
I mean, I noticed, but I did watch several times trying to get it. But the editing was one of the things that worked out well, because you could see the scenes that were like Like some of the car scenes, you're like, there's that projector. It's getting a little glitchy. We're going to cut away real quick.
My favorite thing about rear screen projection, too, is you can't really control the size. And so when those cars were getting close to Bond's cars, it's suddenly like a giant car behind it. It's like that. No, the spatial reasoning doesn't make a lot of sense here.
It's so funny.
Dr. No also introduces title Maurice Binder's famous gun barrel sequence. It was filmed in sepia by putting a pinhole camera inside an actual 38 caliber gun barrel. And Bob Simmons plays the Bond that shoots at the gun barrel.
Oh my goodness. Good for you, Bob.
So they are famous other James Bond, I suppose. In an initial draft of the screenplay that was rejected, the writers had made Dr. No a marmoset, a monkey-type creature, instead of being an actual human. Richard Maybaum was brought in to rewrite the script to keep it closer to the novel. And even further, Joanna Harwood and thriller writer Berkeley Mather were brought on to, quote, script Dr. Maybaum's script. Harwood later took credit for keeping the scripts of Dr. No and From Russia with Love closer to Fleming's novels. So if you think a woman didn't take part in the creation of these, you're wrong. You should thank her, because they're the reason why these earlier movies are very good.
Oh, bless. Love to hear this. Love to learn all this.
Dr. No coincided with the Cuban Missile Crisis, causing JFK to remark famously once, "I wish I had James Bond on my staff." And if you're wondering what happened to Ian Fleming and continuing his story, which we've been telling over the course of the last 3 episodes, we'll pick that up later. There's a copyright adventure that he has with a certain Kevin McClory. You're going to hear that name later, and we're just going to put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in a couple episodes.
Ooh, mister.
The film itself was not greatly received by critics. They're, in fact, quite lukewarm, but the Vatican decided to condemn Dr. No, describing it as a dangerous mixture of violence, vulgarity, sadism, and sex, whilst the Kremlin stated that Bond was the personification of capitalist evil. And guess what that does? That makes people want to go see this movie.
I was going to say, don't threaten me with a good time.
Exactly. You have both the Catholic Church and Communist Russia being like, don't watch it, please. Dr. No ends up grossing $59.6 million worldwide. Once again, this is 1962. And bringing it back to JFK, he even requested a screening of the film at the White House because he was a huge James Bond lover. All that is to say, and next time, I promise the history portion of this will be much shorter, but I think it's very important letting the audience know what sort of defines, what goes into the defining of Bond in pop culture before even the first real movie gets made. There's all this planning, there's all these people, there's all these names, and once again, you'll hear a lot of them again that go into the creation of this. And it's not necessarily that they're undersung, because I think you do hear Terrence Young's name a lot. I think you hear Peter R. Hunt's name a lot. I think you hear John Barry's name quite a bit as well. But it's so interesting that it was this kind of theater troupe isn't perhaps the right term, but this recurring group of people that really make their mark and sort of give this the push into the ocean that is pop culture.
I definitely knew about the JFK of it all. That I've heard before, because I'm like, that sounds so cheesy. But I do like that this does remind me of a lot of IP now and how people are way too invested in it before it even gets made. So some things never change, even little spy crime thriller novels.
Before we get into the film, anything else that you observed, anything that you want to talk about before we get into the actual plot of Dr. No?
My just like galaxy brain question is, why Dr. No first? If it's like, what, the 6th novel? I have questions about that. I imagine that the order of these does not matter at all.
Well, there's that. That's very much it. And yes, there is a continuation in the novels, but for the films, I think it mostly comes down to convenience. You know, Dr. No isn't a huge story. There's not a lot of globe hopping. It's mostly set in Jamaica. And most of the final act can all take place in this one location, which is Dr. No's secret base. And so I think, honestly, it's mostly about what they thought they could get away with committing to film versus, because as you will see, especially as we continue on through this, a lot of the films do a lot more moving from place to place. And yeah, like in the next movie From Russia with Love, a lot of it takes place on the Orient Express. So it's not a huge lift to go into the studio and do a train setting, or, you know, all the Fort Knox stuff that you will see in Goldfinger. It's still much more big in terms of bombast. And this is very much like 7 locations. Let's do it.
Heck yeah. What a good time.
All right. Let's open that dossier on Dr. No. The movie opens with the Bond theme. We get, as mentioned, the previous first gun barrel sequence, and then we get our very first Maurice Binder opening sequence. Very pop art, hip shaking, conga beat. This is not your daddy's spy. Ugh, I feel gross even saying that. I apologize. We get class race commentary right away. The first images you see in the film of Jamaica. And we immediately follow 3 black assassins to an upper crust white club with black servants. I've noticed in this movie, there's basically no black characters in this movie, even though it takes place in Jamaica, that are not in some way in the employ of white people.
Yeah. It's very that.
It's like, really? Come on, guys. So most likely when this movie was being filmed, Jamaica was still a British colony. As of 1962, it was no longer a British colony, but it's very that. It's very like white-centric, just invading black spaces in the most, just so much of it, honestly.
Yeah, any sort of person of color role that has any prominence that's not a servant is like yellow face.
Yeah.
So,
these 3 assassins take out one of the men from the club, put him in a car, get away, and they head to a secret base that is run by British secret intelligence. The first person we see it pulls a bookcase down to reveal a secret transmitter. This bookcase is the fakest, like, is just painted wood. And I was like, that won't hold up to scrutiny. If there's a person with eyes that can see it. I don't know how you felt about the fake bookcase, but I was a little incensed. I was like,
it was honestly like my film school flashbacks of whenever we needed a brick background and we could not find a secure location. So we ordered brick wallpaper, like a very small section for the scenes we needed, and just put it on the wall.
It's basically the sugar walls of the workroom. It's the pink sugar walls. Yeah.
It's like, don't lean against them too much. They're going to collapse.
Exactly. There's another assassination, a file on Dr. No, and we're back in jolly old London. The London headquarters is unable to contact Jamaica, and they instantly realize they need to activate their secret agents. And so Bond is now being searched for at the Casino La Circle. I'm terrible at French. I'm so sorry. I took Spanish in high school.
Same.
This is in London, and we are first introduced to Sylvia Trench. Sylvia Trench is losing gracefully to Bond at Chemin de Fer, which is a French card game. It's very much like whoever has the highest, it's the one that, like, they come over, they serve you the card deck thing, you pull the cards down, whoever has the highest hand. It's very fancy. I'm sure no one plays it nowadays. She asks for his name, and we get our very first Bond, James Bond, out of Bond. And Monty Norman's theme kicks in right as he says it, and honestly, that's pop culture history being made, baby. You hear Bond, James Bond, you hear that theme, and it's like, oh, I'm in for something special.
I need another 1,000.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr...
Bond. James Bond.
Mr. Bond, I suppose you wouldn't care to, raise the limit?
I have no objections.
I just want to talk about this scene specifically real quick before we move any further. I think what's interesting about this scene is introducing us to Sylvia Trench first and introducing to her in terms of the card game. She's sort of presented as the predator in this situation, and Bond is her prey. She's way over her head, but she wants nothing more than to beat him and seduce him at any cost. She's willing to basically bankrupt herself. This is literally the hottest man she's ever seen in her entire life, and she's gorgeous herself. And I find this fascinating that the first woman we're introduced to for Bond doesn't feel, I mean, obviously she's beautiful, but it doesn't feel very male gazy. While it feels very male fantasy, it doesn't, but it's more like he's the sex object. He's the object of desire.
Oh, very much that. I mean, they're both probably two of the most beautiful people of their time. Like, insane that we have beautiful, hot people with chemistry. Like, where are they at? But yeah, just the way he is introduced, he is like a desirable thing and you want him. And I'm like, again, a very queer person, but I'm like, oh, okay. I know you're like a messy man, but okay. I get it. I get it.
And that's one of the things I think is interesting, because I think that, as I mentioned, the desire was that they wanted a James Bond that women wanted to be with and men wanted to be. But I think, honestly, it feels very much like this is a James Bond that women want to be with and men want to be with. He's just exuding sex, and it doesn't seem to.
Do I want to be him or do I want to be with him?
Right, and yeah, I don't know if they're like, the line is so thin. The line is so thin and fuzzy in this very first film. I mean, he looks great. The suit is perfect. It just, I don't know. I think it's one of those funny things.
He's also not like some like roided up superhero,
right,
which is so nice that you can just have devastatingly hot people who just look like regular people that have like showered basically.
I mean, I do think that's part of it too, is because it's not just about him being like, you know, roided up and that sort of like, it's not just about masculinity. Like there's a certain,
he's rugged, but he definitely has showered and wears cologne and like knows how to fold his laundry. Like you just know that he's competent.
I think that's it. I think that's truly it. Bond is called away, but she quickly joins him, and the flirting escalates to the point where they set up a date. Bond tips the doorman on the way out of the casino, which, to be honest, for me, was maybe the sexiest thing that had happened so far in terms of Bond. I was like, he didn't have to tip that man. That's so nice.
He made sure.
He gets to the special intelligence building where you see the first Universal Exports on the wall. You will get to know Universal Exports, Chels. Let me tell you, that is the cover for the agency he works for. He walks in, he tosses his hat very famously, and we get to meet Miss Moneypenny, Lois Maxwell. Lois Maxwell famously was offered the role of Sylvia Trench, and smartly, she was like, I think this role is going to last longer.
Yeah. She's like, I don't want any of that sex and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I'm a married woman. No, thank you.
Exactly. I've written here in my notes, she's gorgeous, but these two together are an HR nightmare.
Absolutely. Like, there's no HR there. There's no HR. This is the 60s. What is HR? We're still figuring that out, like, how many years later?
There's lots of clever wordplay, but he's basically, like, sitting on her lap, stroking her hair.
007 is here, sir. He'll see you in a minute.
Moneypenny. What gives?
Me, given an ounce of encouragement. You never take me to dinner looking like this, James. You never take me to dinner, period.
I would, you know. Only M would have me court-martialed for illegal use of government property.
Flattery'll get you nowhere, but don't stop trying.
It's a lot.
He wants her, and she's like, nah.
Yeah. She's like, maybe next time. Tee-hee. Bond quickly is called into M's office, and M fills Bond in and demands he upgrade his handgun almost immediately. We're introduced to the armorer, Major Boothroyd, who makes fun sexist jokes about his Beretta being light enough for a lady's handbag. And he's equipped with a Walther PPK, which will become famously Bond's weapon. We're also introduced to his license to kill in a very throwaway line. What's interesting about Major Boothroyd is that he is who Q is, and who this show is named after, but the Q also stands for queer. And they sort of hadn't decided about how they were going to go about this in the films yet. So this is mostly the only time I think you'll see Major Boothroyd in this role. And also not Desmond Llewellyn, who will be the long-running Q starting in a couple films. I also love that Bond leaves the office, goes to say something to Moneypenny. M interrupts them and is like, no flirting. Like, Bond has stuff to do. Come on.
Yeah, because she is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Good help is hard to find, Shells, honestly.
Honestly, so true. Keep her around.
Bond returns home and almost kills Sylvia Trench, who has let herself in. She is dressed only in his nightshirt, and she's there to have her needs met. But sadly, he has to go. They kiss with their eyes open, which I think is fucking creepy.
Yeah, don't do that, people. This is just lessons. I know Gen Z doesn't do sex and kissing and stuff, but don't kiss with your eyes open.
Yeah, when you eventually do the sex and kissing, because it will happen, close those eyes. No one needs to like open their eyes and see you going like, at them. But Bond decides he does have time for a game of 9-hole. I wrote that down as a joke, and then I felt immediately gross for having written that out. So take that as you will. She's playing golf in the scene, whatever. It's fine. It's a golf joke, I guess. I don't know. Bond goes to Jamaica, lands, and instantly and purposefully walks into a trap. He essentially gets into a car with a man he knows is trying to kill him, and that car is being tailed by who we will soon find out is Felix Leiter, soon to be friends of him, wearing the coolest fucking femme glasses I've ever seen a dude wear. Literally like giant wings on the side. Like, I was like, okay, babe, like what's up with you, Felix Leiter? After a brief car chase, Bond confronts his would-be assassin, who instead bites into a cyanide capsule hidden in a cigarette. And for the first time, Bond knows he's dealing with people who would rather die for their cause than be caught. You also get Bond going to his meeting at the consulate. I think consulate is the right terminology for that.
Kinda, yeah, pretty much.
And I love that he pulls up with this dead man in the backseat of the car, and he goes, "Sergeant, make sure he doesn't get away." And I love that this is your first, like, Bond's quipping about life and death situations, because it really sort of lets you know that life is kind of cheap to James Bond. Like, he has a license to kill these people, so he's kind of like, whatever. That man could have had a wife and kids.
It's really when the like guard people come and just kind of look after he says that, like, what? That's what got me, the little details.
Absolutely. Bond actually does some investigating around the little secret area with the fake bookcases, which I kind of like, because I feel like you don't always get that out of Bond. You don't always get the, like, oh, I am actually like a smart, capable secret agent. And there's a really odd jump cut edit. I only made a note of it just because I saw it. You're going to see a bunch of these, especially in these earlier films. I'm guessing it's literally just a cheap means to an end, but it's very clear that it's on these prints. So it's not just like damage from the film that happened over the years. I truly don't know what to make of them, but, you know, they're there. Bond finally meets Felix after he checks his credentials. They become fast friends. They discuss the case, and Bond catches a woman taking pictures of them at a club later. He has her brought over, and in the process of attempting to hold her, Felix's assistant's face is cut, which he like laughs off, and also doesn't leave a mark, which I think is really strange, because they like go out of the way to like show her break the thing and scratch his face, and he's like later scenes he's just kind of like, no problem at all, like
it's fine.
He then offers to casually break the woman's arm for James Bond. Bond is told that the only island that they haven't investigated, because they're there. What would you say the plot is? Like, what's going on with Dr. No? Like, why are they specifically researching these islands?
Yeah, so actual plot or what this feels like? Because
a little bit of both,
actual
honestly.
Plot, it's like we are on a wild goose chase that is somehow connected to radioactive material. So I guess Godzilla is coming to this. Come on, Skryonk. But this does feel like a current Days of Our Lives storyline I'm watching, where it's just like one thing leads you to another, and none of it's really connected, but we're just really shoestringing this along and saying it's connected. That's how it feels. It's like, okay, we're just throwing every wild goose chase and turn on this. It does feel like a television series or like story arc over several episodes, the way they have it plotted out. Like you can chop it into different episodes and scenes.
The Dr. Strangeways is the name of the person who was assassinated at the beginning. And essentially, yes, he was investigating some radioactive material occurring in these islands surrounding Jamaica. And the only island that they've yet to investigate is a fictional island called Crab Key that nobody wants to go to. Yeah, of course, Crab Key Island.
You're not supposed to go there, Gavin.
Right.
I'll say so.
There's a dragon, which we will get to. Quirrell is the man I mentioned, by the way, who's Felix's assistant. He tells James Bond that they've gone to all these islands. They're just not supposed to go to Crab Key, which, like, obviously you're investigating an assassination. Like, come on, like, go to the place where nobody is going to. But they do mention that it is in fact owned by a certain Dr. No. And after this scene, we're treated to an assassination attempt of Bond by these three assassins. But Bond gets essentially lucky. Essentially, he is able to duck into his hotel before they even get a shot off. Bond decides to go question a Professor Dent about this specific case, and Dent is definitely spooked by this encounter, and he breaks protocol by going to Crab Key Island during daytime to warn Dr. No. No is none too pleased with this, and we're treated by maybe the coolest scene in this movie, which is this massive empty room with one chair in it and this beautiful, strange skylight coming down, where you only hear Dr. No's voice, and Dent is all alone in this room, and essentially Dr. No has put him in what is a beautiful saw trap, but he provides him with a spider in which to kill Bond with.
What a good time. That spider would get me, by the way. Like, I'm not scared of spiders. I would just see it and be like, well, I guess it's my time.
It's funny, too, because I don't think Connery, I'm not quite sure what the truth is to this, but I'm pretty sure Connery didn't want to film with the spider either. And so I think for the most part, you're seeing body double, except for when it's like majorly in close up. I don't know if there's ever a fake spider involved. It all looks pretty real. It all looked like it was there.
It looks pretty real to me. I see a lot of spiders, y'all.
It's funny, too, though, to my knowledge, tarantulas aren't poisonous. So
I don't think they are. Like, I just killed one a few weeks ago just because it was ginormous and by my office chair. So I don't think they're actually poisonous. Maybe a specific kind? Or maybe this is like a mutant one because they got radioactive stuff. Come on, Spider-Man.
Absolutely. Bond returns to his hotel. He did set up some traps before he left in the dumbest way possible. He literally tore a hair from his head and placed it over the crack in the closet to like keep it. And then when he gets there, it's no longer there. And he didn't stick it with anything. He used his own spit to stick it. It could have fallen.
Yeah, like just do what they did to us on like high school overnight like sporty trips and just put a piece of tape over it.
Yes,
like
exactly.
An inconspicuous spot. Come on, buddy. Learn
this
from high school teachers.
This is why this film needs a true cue. A person to give him a little gadget like, oh, I don't know, Scotch tape and put it over the door.
You can get a lot done with a lot of tape.
Absolutely. So he knows he's not alone, and basically does nothing about it. I mean, there is a great moment where he pours himself a drink or starts to pour himself a drink from an open bottle, realizes that could be poison, takes another bottle from his drawer, opens that and pours himself a drink. And that I do respect.
I do. I was like, I hope that bottle's sealed because you're putting a lot of work into this. You gave it a good sniff and everything. I'm like, I'm glad you had some common sense because not everybody has common sense in these situations.
Absolutely. I also love that Bond has a job that he can have a drink on the job. He's like, yeah, whatever. Like, the world is hanging in the balance, but just gonna get 3 sheets to the wind.
I know. Career goals.
Bond wakes in the middle of the night, draped sexily, only in a sheet. And I was like, okay, Connery. Like, young Connery, we're really doing it.
Oh, yeah.
All I could think of was that scene in Batman Forever where Nicole Kidman is in the sheet and she like rises from the bed and walks to her balcony.
Dr. Chase Meridian, she comes out. It's like a balcony moment. Oh,
You know, her and young Connery hanging out in sheets. Honestly, it's a party.
I'd like to see it.
As you mentioned, he wakes to find the spider on him. He eventually sort of waits for the spider to get off of him. He sort of frozen in terror, but also planning. And the spider finally gets off of him and he's able to throw it off the bed and get it onto the ground and hit it twice with his shoe. And the score punctuates the smashing the spider. And I just think that's so much fun.
Right? Like, great scene. A little bit of overkill, but I love the drama of it all.
But the funny thing is, too, is what this does is this basically tells Bond he's correct. And Dr. No is now their prime suspect. So honestly, as much as Dr. No thought he was doing the right thing by sending Dent to kill him, he was like sending out all the red flags that he's really the villain of this piece.
Yes. Also, can confirm tarantulas technically have venom, but it's useless to humans. It might just be like a mosquito bite to us, essentially.
Oh.
Like discomfort and irritation.
So you get to the end of the movie and Bond's just like got red bumps all over him and he's like, what?
Exactly. Just get him some cortisone cream. He'll be great. He still looks great.
And once again, why you need a proper Q division. Who's providing that cortisone cream?
There was obviously no nurse on set.
Absolutely not. Bond goes back to the office to tell everybody about what he's found. And we are introduced to Miss Taro, who is played by Xenia Moira Marshall, who is a white British woman of French and Irish descent. And this is from her Wikipedia, that says she had, quote, exotic looks, which resulted in her in being cast in ethnic roles, such as an Asian woman, including her role as a Chinese character, Miss Taro, in the first James Bond film, Dr. No.
First off, she is a gorgeous person. Give her that. Is gorgeous, like dark eyes. Get it. Babes, you were a little, like, it took me a double take to clock your yellow face, but girl, no.
See, I don't think you should feel bad about that either, because I've seen this movie many, many times, and truly until this time did I realize, oh, she's supposed to be Asian. I was like, what? And I guess it like makes sense. At one point he sleeps with her and she's like, I'll cook you dinner. I'll make you Chinese food. And I literally just thought like, oh, that's fun. But I was like, so she's supposed to be like, this yellow face is terrible.
It's one of those like she's quote unquote supposed to be, but it's literally like Chinese, weird name tarot. Okay, Miss Tarot cards. And that's it, like just her like outfits essentially.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really?
She's basically wearing like the Amy Winehouse eyeliner. She doesn't
It's literally like she would be Amy Winehouse in Snatch Game.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. Once again, hire Asian actor. What? I know it's 1962, but like
the character didn't even have to be Asian.
No,
this could have just been
all.
a hot person, like a hot baddie.
Bond is informed that people fear Crab Key because there's a, quote, dragon there. A rumor started by Dr. No. Miss Taro invites Bond to her isolated abode, but it's a trap. and we get yet another car chase with the worst rear screen projection out of the whole movie. Like, this is where the car is giant behind him. It's wild.
It's giant. If you're paying attention enough, it kind of glitches a little bit.
Yes.
It's very funny to me.
Absolutely, because this is a big screen, big budget movie. We're like, what are we doing here?
They spent $1 million on this. What are you talking?
Bond gets away, and the pursuing car casually explodes as it falls down a hill.
That's what happens when you don't catch the guy. You explode.
It's so funny, too, because I was watching it really closely this time, and I was like, this explosion starts in the back seat. What are we doing here?
They forgot to turn a candle warmer off. It's fine.
Exactly. They're really into aromatherapy here in Jamaica. Bond quips, I think they're on their way to a funeral, and I genuinely laughed. He gets to Miss Taro's house, and she's surprised to see him, and she also apparently showers in her wig, and her hair is such a wig. I was like, we could not get human hair for this. We could, like, this is synthetic house down boots.
They
like,
only had $1 million.
I do think it's so funny that I wonder if the reason that she is a white person in race makeup is so it would be okay for Bond to kiss her, which I know is such a dark fucking thought, but it's 1962.
That's the thing, because, like, if we're looking at the Hays Code, and the Hays Code doesn't, like, people say it's 1960. This film was made around 1960,
right.
61. It did, even after it technically, quote unquote, went away, films were still like, not sure how sexy we're gonna be. It was really John Schlesinger bringing his little British ass over and being like, no, we're gonna be hot. We're gonna be cool. We're gonna have Julie Christie doing hot things. We're gonna have Dustin Hoffman yelling at people on the street.
And it's one of those things, too, where you think about, like, you know, this movie plays over the entire country. And there were, you know, famously the episode of Star Trek where Kirk kisses Uhura, like, couldn't air in certain states because it was an interracial kiss. And so I just wonder, like, if part of their thought process was like, okay, this is okay because she's really a white woman playing an Asian person. But that makes it worse. That makes it so much worse.
It does. And, like, again, had the kiss been with an actual Asian person, they would have just cut it out in countries like the South, where that was a very common practice. But also, I don't even think the loving case had happened by then, so we were still dealing with some things.
Absolutely. I did make a note that I was like, Bond, please wait for her nails to dry, at least.
I was so worried.
Essentially, Bond gets her taken away by his people. She drives away after he gets the information she needs, and he heads back.
Well, no, they definitely, when they hook up, she is so surprised, but she's still like, I guess we're still doing this. She commits to the bit.
She does.
But also, good for her. Like, she has to know something's coming up soon. It's like, we're going to get some, then go to prison or wherever they take her.
Yeah, that's true. He does fully sleep with her, which, once again, you know, who knows what the censors were thinking at the time, but regardless, cast an Asian person. That's all I'm saying. Bond goes back to his hotel and he decides to lie in wait for the professor, who is going to attempt to kill Bond. He does the whole, like, pillows in the bed trick, like the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like, I'm sick. And Professor Dent empties his gun into this body, and he comes into the room. Bond gets the information he needs, and when Dent goes to shoot him and realizes he's out of bullets, Bond kills him in cold blood. He shoots him once in the front and then once in the back. And a lot of people were actually kind of put off by this when this happened. But I mean, I think this is who Bond is. Bond has a literally, he has a license to kill. He will kill these people. But it is, like, not cool to just be like, and I'll just make sure you're dead. Like, one in the back.
To be fair, this other person did just empty his gun into the pillows and thought it was Bond. So it's like, I don't know, eye for an eye. That's a section of the Bible.
Exactly. That's true. You have a point there. Bond finally decides to make his way to Crab Key Island. He lands on the island and sleeps until it's light, where he is awakened by Ursula Andress singing her little mango tree song that you've heard earlier in the film many times. She rises from the ocean and single-handedly saves the bikini market for all of history. Her very famous yellow bikini, which was actually brilliantly thought of, the costume designer sewed it into an army belt, which is why it's got such a thick belt attached to it.
Smart.
Exactly. How else was she going to carry those shells that she's collecting? She instantly threatens Bond with a knife because she's smart, but then realizes that he means her no harm. She's Ryder, Honey Ryder, our very first Bond girl name. I love that he just gives like a little like, oh.
What's your name?
Ryder.
Ryder what?
Honey Ryder. What's so funny about it?
Nothing. It's a very pretty name.
She's a shell collector who's about to get in the worst case of wrong place, wrong time in the history of the world. And Bond's very quick to manhandle her. He's very like grabbing her by the arm, pulling her away and whatnot. And I was kind of like, okay, you can just tell her like, we need to go this way. Like, you don't need to, it's a bit much.
Yeah. Like very much treating her like a child immediately.
And the other thing is, that's interesting is she very much knows what she's doing. She's very aware about not being on that island, about not getting caught. And Bond isn't fully dismissive of this, but he's certainly not nice about it. Essentially, they get caught. They're being searched for. This sequence goes on for quite a while, shockingly quite a while, I'll be honest, of them wandering around the island, like hiding in the water, hiding in the trees, like trying to mostly keep away from these guards who are after them. But she tells him her real reason for being there is that she's seeking revenge. Her father had disappeared on Crab Key earlier. She's basically a genius in terms of intellect, but she has a tragic background, which involves, trigger warning, sexual assault, a man who she later poisoned with a spider, and he took a whole week to die. And I love that she follows that with, like, essentially the Dunice, like, did I do bad? Like...
It's very that. It's just like the way James Bond just judges her immediately for killing a man who assaulted her. And it's like, buddy, you just
you shot
like killed a person in cold blood. Come on.
Like that man was not going to take you. Like you.
We are not throwing stones in this house.
The dragon is revealed to be a tank-like car. Quirrell, who has been with them the whole time, I suppose I should, but...
He has technically been there the whole time, and you would never know.
Right, exactly. Once again, Quirrell's character is a black character who is in the employ of Felix Leiter, essentially in the employ of James Bond. And it's one of those things where it's just like, once again, like, why?
And even on the island, he conveniently disappears for long periods of time while, like, Honey and James are chilling and hanging out and getting all these backstories. He literally just appears.
Yeah.
When it's so stupid.
It's very frustrating, especially because, you know, for most of the movie, he's one of the few characters of color who has a lead role, because every other character of color in a lead role is actually a white person. And so it's really frustrating. He's then immediately killed by these guards in the dragon tank. And I wrote, honestly, why? He could have moved. He like literally stands in the way as the dragon sets him on fire. And I was like, why? Like, run to the left.
We just have to show that the dragon can breathe fire and kill people, I guess. This little transformer candle.
So Bond and Honey are captured. They're brought into the secret lair of Dr. No on this island. They're both radioactive, which I'm sure is totally fine and will absolutely come into play in the later films. Spoiler alert, it will not. They do this famous decontamination conveyor belt, which will be beautifully parodied in Austin Powers many, many years later. I love the decontamination conveyor belt. I feel like that's what I should have as my shower in the morning instead of having to like go in. Like I should just be able to like stand on a belt, have it shoot me with soap, have it scrub me off.
Oh, I would love that. Like, just put in all our little routine things. Just let it go. Let it scrub us down. Let it tell us, "No, you nasty girl, get back in there."
I have written here, after this, Bond and Honey are taken to their basically palatial suite rooms. So I've written here Dr. No's underground base and health suites. They're captive guests. They're served food and coffee. They instantly, Bond, who earlier in the film was like, I don't trust this alcohol that was left here, I'm going to open another bottle, willingly drinks this coffee, and they both immediately pass out. Duh.
I will say, I will go to this Airbnb. It's a very nice little secret lair area. No coffee, please.
Dr. No, who we're not actually really introduced to yet, sneaks into their room at night, and we see his shadow fall upon Bond. And they play this like vaguely oriental type of music, and it's so gross. It's just like, we
Not
got
great.
it.
Yeah.
The only thing available for them when they finally do wake up are Asian style outfits. And this whole thing just feels like a fetishist dream. Like, just very much like white people being like, oh yeah, like, ooh, we're going to fetishize this.
We have to show them in the quote unquote exotic outfits, you know. This isn't normal. There's no pants like normal. Ugh.
Right. Oh, a Nehru jacket. Oh my God. They're brought to Dr. No's suite, and I have to say his living room fucking rocks.
Right.
He also has an aquarium with giant fish in it, which is, as I found out in my research process, just magnified stock footage, because essentially they didn't have money to shoot a scene with it. So they got the stock footage, but the fish were all way too small. And so they blew it up.
Yeah, they were like goldfish.
Yes, exactly. And so that's why Dr. No has that line where he's like, oh, yes, magnified. And it's like, okay.
Where did I read that it's like, they like reasoned that, yes, he can be rich and evil, but he can also be tacky? Like, they just reasoned, like, no, he just doesn't have taste or style, essentially.
I didn't read that, but I love that because it's so true. It's like...
It is. I want those goldfish, though. Like, flavor blast me now.
When Dr. No is first introduced, his very first line is the famous $1 million, Mr. Bond. He's explaining how much it costs to make this underground base. But I love the fact that, like, that's another parody that'll come back in Austin Powers. And just really funny that that's the idea of, like, that's how much money it was, you know, that even Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman were like, ah, yes, the million we're making this movie with, like, that's what Dr. No would want. It's $1 million.
Now $1 million will get you like a 1-bed, 2-bath, like townhouse in LA, like if you're lucky, in the middle of nowhere.
I wrote here, there's no reason for Dr. No's race makeup. Very true. They could have cast any biracial person to play this role.
No,
yeah. He does do a background monologue, which is really amazing, and he delivers it so well.
Dr. No, you haven't done badly, considering.
A handicap is what you make of it. I was the unwanted child of a German missionary and a Chinese girl of good family. Yet I became treasurer of the most powerful criminal society in China.
It's rare for the Tongs to trust anyone who isn't completely Chinese.
I doubt they should do so again.
And essentially Bond's like, great, like, that's fantastic, you've told me this story, but also, like, why is she still here? Like, she has nothing to do with this, let Honey Rider go. Honey Rider is not having it. She's like, no, let me stay, like, what are you doing? And Bond's like, no, let her leave. And Dr. No's like, yes, she can leave. My guards will have fun with her, because teehee, sexual assault's so funny.
Exactly.
We get our first name drop for Spectre, which I believe starts in the novels in Thunderball, but that will also come up later. So we'll discuss that in a later episode.
I just know it's the bad Sam Smith song that I'm still angry about a decade later.
One of the worst, honestly. Spectre stands for Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion. Say that 3 times fast. Dr. No wants to offer Bond a job, but Bond's like, no, I'm not into it. And Dr. No maybe says my favorite line of almost any James Bond villain, which is he says,
But you were different. You cost me time, money, effort. You damaged my organization and my pride. I was curious to see what kind of a man you were. I thought there might even be a place for you with Spectre.
And I'm flattered. I prefer the revenge department. Of course, my first job would be finding the man who killed Strangways and Quarrel.
Unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid policeman.
I'm so gonna use that line.
yes, it's so good. And honestly, like, kind of correct.
I mean,
You know?
not wrong.
Exactly. Bond's accommodations now are a lot less nice. He's basically thrown into a room, but they foolishly leave a vent in the ceiling for him to escape in. And I didn't fact check this, and I really should have because we had some time, but I believe this occurs in the book, but it's like a test to see if he would use it to escape. Whereas in the movie, this vent is just used for James Bond to escape his cell. And the bad guys just seem very dumb about putting a vent. Like, what are you doing?
It's like Star Wars A New Hope level dumb. We're just going to throw him in a trash compactor. Okay.
I do mention that Connery is doing the Lord's work in those white pants. And he somehow doesn't die when the hot pipe is flooded with water. I was like, we're getting some Connery stew here. We're cooking it up. We're getting that meat off that bones. We also get our first disguise myself as a henchman for the series as Bond dons a radiation suit. Essentially, you see No's plan. He's going to thwart a rocket launch and hold everything for ransom. But Bond is able to sabotage No's plan by overloading his reactor that the person he stole the suit from was working at. Nobody realizes that it's not that guy until it's too late, even though he is acting strange as all get out throughout the whole thing.
He's got an extra pep in his step. He's standing a little taller.
Exactly.
Again, I'm pretty sure Star Wars A New Hope stole a lot of things from this movie now that we think about it.
After sabotaging his plan, his men run in fear as the reactor starts to overload, but Dr. No, in anger, decides to fight Bond, which is fun because he does have these weird robotic hands. We didn't really talk about them, but he does mention that he lost the use of his hands, and it's implied that his new hands are fully robotic, fully a technology we did not have in the 60s, so little sci-fi or spy-fi, if you will. And and that seems like it would be quite an advantage against Bond, but actually it leads to his doom as he can't use his hands to grip his way out of the reactor as he falls into it. All of this is set to an American rocket launch occurring in the background, and I actually really liked that touch because it's not... Mm-hmm. I think the concept for most movies would be like big booming orchestra music, like really let the audience know the tension through the music that's happening, but instead you're getting the tension of like, will this rocket launch succeed? And I thought that was like I'm impressed by that.
No, that is a good touch because normally that's like big music swelling, John Williams doing a little too much in the moment, and
yeah,
we're like, well, we know where this is going.
Bond finally remembers Honey Rider was there with him. And I'm betting she's having a terrible stay. He ends up freeing her from a death trap casually. She's just literally in a death trap that like they're gonna let the water rise. He yells
at people, "Where is she? Where is she?" Like bury that, and then you just open a door and she's just hanging out. Let's untie her. Let's get her out of here, I guess.
And they both escape the island while it explodes behind them. They're both marooned in the ocean. They like punch a couple guys to get them out of the boat, but they're both marooned in the ocean when their boat runs out of fuel. And luckily, Felix Leiter comes to the rescue, starts to tow them to safety, throws them a cord as they begin to cuddle in the boat, and Bond unties the cord so they can float away and have a little fuck. And that's the end of the movie.
They're saved by Hawaii Five-0.
Yes, exactly. Chels, before we get into talking about, all the fun little bits that we didn't get to during the plot description, I have to ask, what was it like to see your first Bond movie? Like, what were you sort of expecting going in, and what do you think you got out of it?
I wasn't sure what to really expect beyond, like, gorgeous people and maybe, like, some spy stuff. And they definitely delivered that. But I was like, ooh, I knew there'd be some racism. But man, the racism was hitting really hard.
It's everywhere.
It is like every layer of this is so racist. It just, like, it almost feels like, and I know people have so many feelings about this movie. Like, I was reading that this is one of their favorite Bond movies, and they're like, Honey is like one of the best Bond girls. I think she was like Entertainment Weekly's #1. I read that, and I'm like, okay, but which performer gets that?
Right.
Who gets it? The singing actress, the dub, or the, like, I guess the warm body on set? So
Right.
It was very interesting. It reminds me of Britta on Community being like, I can excuse the racism, but I can't excuse XYZ. That just kept popping up every single time something messy happened. I'm like, how do people reconcile a lot of this? Because so many people love this movie, and I am just like, I can see all the fun parts of this movie and the great performance by some men in it, mostly one man. But then it's just like, ooh, yikes. There's a lot of yikes.
It's really fascinating because I do wonder how much is like an inherited cultural, like our pop cultural sort of knowledge that it gets passed down from like our fathers to, I mean, as the man on the podcast, which barely, I think it's interesting that, like, and like I said in our first episode, I didn't really grow up with the Connery ones. I grew up more with the Roger Moore ones. But like watching this and seeing like how racist it is and like how sexist it is, and yet it's like these are the things that people don't really talk about because they just sort of blindly talk about the adventure portion. But they're sort of it's sort of impossible to unlink them from each other, because it's so pervasive in every step.
This is not like a separate the art from the artist, which a lot of people have to do with Connery because of comments he made while he was alive, like some very misogynistic, abusive things he said.
Years ago, you did an interview, which may come back to haunt you. You know what I'm going to say, right?
No.
Okay. You did an interview in which you said, not the worst thing to slap a woman now and then. As I remember, you said you don't do it with a clenched fist. It's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
You haven't?
No, not at all.
You think it's good to slap a woman?
No, I don't think it's good. I
think it's bad?
I don't think it's that bad. I think that it depends entirely on the circumstances and if it merits it. Yeah.
What would merit it?
Well, if you have tried everything else, and women are pretty good at this, they can't leave it alone. They don't want to have the last word, and you give them the last word, but they're not happy with the last word. They want to say it again and get into a really provocative situation. Then I think it's absolutely right.
To give her a good slap?
Yeah, absolutely.
But then it's just like, no, this is intrinsically tied together. Like, his poor behavior in real life, and then it's just like, oh no, he's literally doing exactly that in the movie. He's like slapping people around, and you're like, ooh, yikes.
Exactly.
Being very creepy. We also have to question with Miss Tarot. It's just like, was that consensual or not? Like, what was she doing? Was she just there to like stay alive and doing what she needed to stay alive, like Sammy Brady on Days of Our Lives? Actual storyline.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because she's still working under the orders of a man, of Dr. No. And her order is basically just to distract Bond until they can get a guy there to kill him. And she's going to do it by any means necessary. Now, admittedly, the film does establish that these people would rather die than face the wrath of Dr. No. But still, it's one of those things where, like, that's still not really consensual sex that she's having, because she's doing it under duress on both ends,
Exactly.
Connery also knows that she's out to get him.
Yeah, he fully knows, and he still just like expects her to sleep with them, and that's like, ugh. Like,
Yeah.
I prefer a more of like, yes, you both know that you're on opposite sides, but there is just that strong chemistry you can't deny, and you hook up anyways. Like, even though you're on opposite sides, that's just like a trope that is in so many other movies. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. And I feel like I'll probably get more of that later
Yeah.
on.
You got
Okay,
it.
good.
Yeah. I do want to talk just a tiny bit. You know, I love talking about the gadgets. This movie doesn't really have any gadgets. I mean, he eventually gets a gun. Like I said up front, Major Boothroyd makes this dumb joke about like being like the gun in a lady's purse. It's unnecessary, but also like, why is that lady carrying a gun? Huh? Clearly, she knows something that we don't. And also, I wanted, you know, just in general, when we started this project, I wanted to talk about the women, and we've mostly sort of talked about Honey Rider, but why? I mean, this is such a trope when it comes to women, and we even talked about this on the mixed reviews when we did our Jodie Foster episode. But like, why do you think that they felt the need to add this backstory, or even Ian Fleming felt the need to add this backstory for Honey Rider, that she's not just driven by the revenge of the loss of her father, who is a man, but also driven by a sexual assault that occurred? Like, what? Like, can't women, like, why do women have to be motivated by this stuff, but men don't need this sort of motivation?
Yeah, no, it's just one of those, like, I remember that episode when you're talking about it, and all I think is, like, the only motivation a man knows is sexual assault. Jodie Foster has said that. I think she said it this past year on,
Yes, yeah.
one of her Oscar or Emmy campaign things. And she's right. That's the only thing they know how to write. But here's the secret. Every woman you've ever seen has been sexually assaulted or harassed in some way, in some of the most casual ways. So, like, that's not the motivating factor for most women because it is so casual and, like, to all of us. Like, you just know that. And so I'm just like, most of these women in the movie aren't even characters. It's just like, oh, I was sexually assaulted, so you have to care about me. You want me to win. And it's like, no, we just don't know who you are. Like, that is not the most interesting thing about you. Like, I think what's interesting is this woman manages to sneak over to a secret island and never get caught. Why don't we just use her skill to, like, further the plot of this? And, like, maybe her skill of, like, not getting caught is how, like, what's that one guy won't get killed by the fire-breathing dragon robot thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right, by the way, that Quarrel, by the way, is that character's name.
That's his name.
But you're absolutely right, because as soon as Bond gets involved with her on the island, it's almost as if anything that she's done to try and keep herself safe and keep herself from being killed doesn't matter anymore, because Bond has all the answers. And therefore, but we know how capable this person is. We know,
she's been on her own. She scavenges in forbidden places and sells this stuff. Like, she's a person who knows how to get through and survive life. Like, James Bond is not here to save her. Like, why are we doing this? Like, she felt like a character who did not need to be there. You could cut her out and it's the exact same movie.
I actually really agree, honestly. And I know that we love having a Bond woman, and I know, but like, this unfortunately isn't really a strong woman character because she's kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, and it's like, there are other women characters. We've talked about the two, I would say, main ones, but like Miss Moneypenny, I feel like she's got the right ideas in life, but we also don't get to see her a lot. I think the woman who is really the real bad bitch, who has her shit together, is Sylvia. I love her. She knows what she wants. She goes for it. She's fine. She got her own money. She's like, let's get some of that and bounce.
Well, spoiler alert, you have not seen the last of Sylvia Trench, so...
He stole my heart.
I do want to just put in a side note, and not to tell my friends stories, but I recently was having lunch with a friend who just got back from Greece, and she was talking about how she had a Lyft driver, or Uber driver, or whatever, who then got her phone number from the company and WhatsApped her later in the evening, like, hey, what's up? Like, what are you doing? And she's like, yeah, I've told a bunch of friends about this. And they're all like, oh my God, like, how's that? And she's like, I'm a woman. This sort of thing happens to me all the time. And it's just one of those things where, like, to this day, women in culture by men are treated as like just pure sex objects. And it's disgusting. Like, Yeah. I know that's like a sidebar, but everything that you just said instantly reminded me of that, where it's just like, why do we, Honey Rider is, no less an object than his new gun. And that's...
Oh, yeah. Exactly. It's just like, this is also a note to every single person on social media. If you are just like DMing or bothering a woman or immediately acting like they're their friend and they just literally tweet you like a thank you or be like, that's cool, or retweet something, they're not your friend. Do not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. People really need to learn to read signals. I think
don't get too friendly with me on social media, people. I'm not nice. I'm silly, but I'm not nice.
Also, in terms of queer coding, I feel like the queerest character in this movie is the camera. I feel like the camera is all about Bond. It's all about lingering on him, lingering on bits of his body. Like I said, that scene with him in the sheet, like even him in the like Nehru jacket towards the end and whatnot, or the white pants. Because No himself isn't really even a sexual character in any way, shape, or form. He's kind of, in terms of James Bond villains too, you'll find kind of one note. He has that great monologue about his past, but that's it. Like, that's really, who cares? He's more defined by his race makeup and robot hands than he is about anything else.
Exactly. Whereas James Bond, I think of him and I am just like, damn, what a man, what a body. I know why that tarantula was walking slow, y'all. Exactly. The tarantula was doing work.
It's like, if I'm going to die, I'm going to take my time.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so I truly don't think that there is much of a queer angle here in terms of, but I did just think, like, to myself, I was like, wow, the camera itself is really the like purveyor of the sex in terms of like and it's very specifically when it comes to, I feel like it's voyeuristic with him in a way that we won't get again until Daniel Craig.
That kind of makes sense because just visually, Daniel Craig is, what a man. Just beautiful. Probably not a thought in that head, but
I don't know. I will say, every time I read an interview with Daniel Craig, I'm kind of like, thoughtful. Yeah.
But when I see him in Knives Out, I'm like, what's going on up there?
Yeah, exactly. They're really letting you get away with this accent again? They're really going to let you do that?
Yeah, exactly. But man, I'm just like, I'm almost surprised the villain wasn't full Disney queer coded, where you're like, they gay. That's Ursula. That's Scar. Come on, Jafar. I feel like that's kind of what it should have been. Like, you know what? Let's be gay, do crime. We want that now.
And the closest you get is him like sneaking into Bond's room at night. But I feel like that's more like a know your enemy situation. It didn't feel.
Yeah. Like, had he like pulled up the sheet and like did a little gazing.
Yeah.
Checking him out, sizing him up. Maybe we could like make a case. But this felt pretty straight. This one did feel like it was for the girls.
Yeah.
It was for the girlies.
For the girls and the girlies, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that very much closes the case on Dr. No. Thank you so much, Chels. I'm so happy you're on this ride with me because I think you're just the perfect co-host for this. And also, I'm so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I watched this multiple times by my own.
I do think, positives, beautifully directed. I understand why it launches the series. It's never been my favorite of the James Bond movies, but like, I think the good stuff is good, but oh boy, some of that bad stuff really weighs heavy on it.
You can see like all the little like chocolate chips, and eventually it's going to be a beautiful cookie. But this is just like somebody made the chocolate chips, but we got some like moldy flour.
Absolutely. Yeah, something doesn't taste quite right in the mix.
It's not right.
Well, thank you, agents, for listening to the Q Division. If you'd like to listen to our previous episodes, we're available wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at QDivisionPod on both, or email us at qdivisionpod@gmail.com. As previously mentioned, the Q Division Podcast is a proud member of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective. If you'd like to know more about Glitterjaw, you can always go to glitterjaw.com. Until next time, agents, we hope to have left you shaken, not stirred.
Sean Connery left me shaken. Oof.